Thank you for staying with us. Now to the first conversation. Nigeria's federal government and organized labor concluded a meeting on the contentious national minimum wage, agreeing to set the new minimum wage for Nigerian workers at 70,000 naira. The president of the Nigerian Labour Congress, Ajaero, spoke to State House correspondents after the meeting with the president, stating that the unions agreed to the offer due to the additional incentives attached, including the president's promise to review the minimum wage every 3 years, rather than the previous practice of reviewing it every 5 years. In Abuja, Nigeria, Dr Samson Simon, Chief Economist at ARKK Economics Data Limited, is joining me for this conversation. Thank you so much for joining me, Doctor.
Thank you for having me. Good morning, Nigerians.
Good morning to you. Well, organized labor finally reached a consensus with the federal government yesterday, 70,000 naira, which, by the way, is $43 below analyst, projection of $100, which should be, somewhere above 160,000 naira. Do you see this as wasted effort, as some are already saying?
No, it's not really a wasted effort. What is the minimum wage at present? Is 30,000 naira. And what do they want to legislate it into? To 70,000. That's more than twice what is obtainable at the moment, the new minimum wage. So it's not really a wasted effort. I know they wanted far, far more than this. At the time, they were asking for over 600,000. And some people projected that 100,000 would likely be the case. And sadly, they couldn't get the 100,000. But it's not a wasted effort since they have increased the minimum wage. They have more than doubled it. So that's not a wasted effort. And in terms of productivity too, is very important because it's not just about hiking the minimum wage now. You have to look at the productivity. What exactly are the workers going to offer in return for the increase in the minimum wage? It's not only looking at the angle because the cost of living has gone up. What about the people employing labor, whether it's government or the private sector? What value would they get in return for more than doubling the minimum wage? So you have to look at things from all angles. It's not a wasted effort. And they have also reduced the number of years needed to review the minimum wage from 5 to 3 years, which I think is good. And the president also made additional promises when it comes to CNG buses being provided, when it comes to infrastructure.
Dr. Samson, we'll come to all of that, really. You talked about something that I feel I need to take you on. You talked about the fact that, there is an increase, which for you is more than double. But when you price in inflation and the exchange rate devaluation, at the end of the day, we're not different from where we're coming from. May 2023, when you talk about 30,000 now, we knew what it was in dollar terms. And if someone says, well, we're talking about dollar, we're talking about dollar because Naira has depreciated and we are seeing it pricing into inflation and prices of goods and services. Now, looking at this, does it seem to you like Labour probably didn't really have a strategy for this negotiation ab initio?
Well, you were the first question before I address this question. You were saying if it was a wasted effort, and I wanted to justify that it's not a wasted effort, and that was why I went into so many things. Then, looking at the minimum wage, the new minimum wage that is supposed to be passed into law, I know if you adjust for inflation, if you adjust for exchange rate, foreign exchange rate, it may seem like next to nothing. It's less than $50,000. So it may not seem much. But considering where you're coming from, it's not bad. You have made progress. It was Martin Luther King that said, if you cannot fly, run. If you cannot run, walk. If you cannot walk, crawl. By all means, make progress. So progress has been made. I'm not saying it's not enough. It's more than clear that this does not suffice. This is not enough to compensate for the increase in inflation over the years since the last increment in 2019, and also for the devaluation and the depreciation of the Naira. It's more than clear this is not enough. But at least it has inched up, it has increased, and our workers will be better off for it, particularly the low-income earners.
Well, let's get back to, the other point you were making. Labour actually explained that it's accepted the minimum wage because of certain incentives. So maybe this is the point where you get to talk to us about these incentives, how far-reaching they are, and how we can sort of track them for maximum impact. We've heard about CNG all along. How many of those buses are on the road? How many, filling stations already have those, conversion centers? All of these things. These are questions we also need to consider, don't you think?
Yes, you have a point. Promises were made. But if I would put myself in the shoes of labor, of organized labor, I'm afraid that this may likely be more promises than actual things coming. Or it may even take, in the alternative, I'm not saying that the presidency or the president has no intention of fulfilling these promises, but this may take a while. And we may even be talking about this when they are trying to review the minimum wage in 3 years' time, because it's easier said than done that you're going to provide CNG buses and you have the infrastructure for that. I know it was part of the promises made, but it's not something that you just wake up from sleep and decide that there should be CNG buses, there should be infrastructure for that. I know that the government has been putting in the effort even before this current administration, but we all know that it's a new thing for us on this side of the world. So it may take a little bit, it may take a while for all these things to materialize. And even when you look at helping the subnationals to pay this minimum wage and even organize private sector, well, what exactly are you going to do? Well, what's the framework? You need to come up with the framework. Will the government use, take part of the allocation that is supposed to go to subnationals and then pay these workers directly? If these subnationals refuse to pay, will they also cut taxes for private sector to afford the members of organized private sector to afford this new minimum wage? So there are a lot of questions than even answers. So if I were a part of organized labor, whether NLC or TUC, I'll be a little bit skeptical about these promises. They are not likely going to materialize as soon as they think or they would want it to be.
Dr. Simon, I like what you said, because the president was saying that it was going to help organize private sector and even subnationals to pay this particular money. And you already gave us, so you asked some questions, but I'm putting that question back to you. What are your recommendations? If government says we're going to support these people so that they can pay, what are we looking at here? How can that actually happen? Isn't that just some promise that would never be fulfilled or something?
Well, we operate a federation. So the assumption is that states are semi-autonomous. They are not fully controlled by the federal government. They are not even controlled by the federal government. And if you remember vividly, the last increase in 2019, when it was increased from 18,000 to 30,000, there are so many states that have not even started paying that 30,000. And it's not because allocation has not gone up. Money has gone up. The allocation they get on a monthly basis, particularly under this administration, has gone up. So that if you look at it, there's no justification for they are not paying the 30,000. And now you're asking them to go to 70,000, and you're going to help them to pay 70,000. So I feel the chances are slim. Even if you increase this allocation, I don't think you can compel the states to pay 70,000. But maybe there is a way that you can come to an understanding. That means the federal government and the states and even organized private sector can have an understanding that, all right, the increase in this is how we're going to do it, or like what we saw during the last administration, even though it's not a good thing, where the central bank came in and pumped money into the economy through ways and means, and the federal government increased allocation to the states. So you can have an understanding that this money should specifically be for this purpose. But the implementation is still going to be a little bit of a challenge. And for private sector, I think what the government can do is to cut taxes for them. I know they're trying to increase revenue, so this might be the wrongest time to cut taxes, but you cannot just ask private sector to just increase the minimum wage when they cannot afford to. I know that it's a law and there are consequences, and you can prosecute somebody for not paying the minimum wage. But have we ever been effective in implementing these laws, particularly when it comes to the punitive measures indicated in our laws? So maybe the federal government can explore that. If a particular agent or particular business or a particular entity is not paying, that is clearly against the law. So maybe the Attorney General of the Federation can approach the Supreme Court. I'm just looking at possibilities where the federal government can actually ensure that this minimum wage is paid by everybody.
Well, what's your thoughts on the proposal? You know, some persons are talking about moving this particular item, which is the minimum wage, to the concurrent list, taking it away from the exclusive list. I mean, what do you make of this, and what can be the implication if this ever happens?
If there's one thing I know about the Tinubu administration, I think it will be more than happy to remove this item from the exclusive list to the concurrent list. If there's one thing that they have consistently been doing, is to try to remove certain things from the exclusive list to the concurrent list. And I think that will go a long way. But if I were working for the states, I'll be a little bit afraid, because if these things are removed from the exclusive list, the federal government will have less say in it, because it's no longer the exclusive reserve now. So the states too have equal powers to the federal government. So the federal government may be paying maybe 70,000, and some states would still be paying 18,000. That's the likely scenario that will play out. But I think the federal government also has to consider the ability of these subnationals to pay. Some states are going to struggle to pay this. And they have been struggling even at the 18,000. Some of them are owing salaries, or they have cut down the incomes or the salaries of their workers. So you can only imagine at 70,000. If you're struggling to pay 18,000, you're struggling to pay 30,000, then what would be the case if you are expected to pay 70,000? So that's the likely scenario that will play out. And there will be likely job losses too, because if you are trying to pay, maybe one option for you is to reduce the number of workers that you have so that you can pay the little that you have. And that will likely increase the number of people that are unemployed within the Nigerian economy.
Right, Dr. Simon, from what you said now, I don't know, but I feel you probably a queue behind those who are talking about, you know, a just and equitable distribution and all of those. Do you think we should have some equity in paying this minimum wage? Maybe we say some persons do not have the ability to pay, so maybe there should be a threshold or a floor, really, that cannot be exceeded, or you can't go below them in some quarters. Is that what you also think can work here?
We're talking about minimum wage. That's the floor. So what they are saying is that you should not pay below 70,000. I know it's very rare now, but even the idea of minimum wage came when people were trying to propose a ceiling where you cannot go above. So the floor is already there. And I think the states, if they prioritize paying the workers, I think they should pay. And I think what they should look at is the value.
Dr. Simon, my question is this. There are those who are saying, let's decentralize it. Let's not make it, you know, maybe 70,000 across board. Probably we'll say some states are not viable. We say, okay, so for states within whatever criteria, do not pay below this amount. And therefore, organized private sector who are also saying they can't pay 70,000 naira minimum wage. You know, maybe we have a floor for them. Do you agree to that?
I don't think so. I think as much as the ability of the entity to pay, whether it's a private sector player or a subnational or a state government or a local government to pay, should be taken into account. I think some of these entities will likely not even pay 18,000. Maybe they'll still be paying the 5,500 that was made into law under Obasanjo, because if such a thing will be allowed. So I think there's a need to encourage everybody to try to pay that. Even if it's difficult to do that, if it's difficult to implement, it's difficult to make all the entities to pay. But I think everybody should be encouraged. And I think that will go a long way in helping the workers. Because if you leave it too open, then a lot of workers are going to suffer. And that will not really be good. Because at present, we have high poverty levels. We have we have cost of living crisis. So it's likely going to get worse. So I don't buy that. I think everybody should be encouraged. There should be ways that you can encourage and help all these entities to be able to pay something that is a living wage, something that is efficient wage, so that everybody benefits from it, whether the employer or the employee.
Dr. Samson Simon, Chief Economist, ARKK Economics and Data Limited. Thank you for your time and your thoughts.